No new infections reported in Muskoka. Many provincial parks in Muskoka and Parry Sound still closed until Friday. And I chat with an immunologist about pushing back against COVID-19. All that and more coming up right now. Welcome to Cogeco News for May the 11th. I'm James Bowler with what's happening in your community. Well, aside from a recent outbreak at a local retirement residence, Muskoka has avoided any community infections of COVID-19 for a few weeks. Today, that trend continued as no new confirmed infections were reported from the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit. And mentioning the outbreak at Muskoka Traditions Chartwell Retirement Residence, no new infections have been reported among the residents or staff at that facility. The woman in her 90s who was originally infected is still reportedly in hospital. On the provincial front, the numbers slid down again today below 400, suggesting again we could be seeing an eventual downward trend of COVID infections. However, Doug Ford will still head into Queen's Park tomorrow, looking for an extension of the emergency declaration to make sure Ontarians are still taking this pandemic very seriously.
Seasonal businesses and auto dealerships are open. Construction on many sites is restarting. And our provincial parks and conservation reserves are starting to reopen today for limited access. We're reopening things safely and with strict public health measures in place. Today, thousands of people are going back to work. Thousands of people are earning a paycheck again. We have a framework to reopen our economy gradually and safely. We have workplace safety guidelines that will help businesses adapt to our new reality. My friends, we've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. We're working to get more businesses and services up and running again as safely as we can. And I will have more to say in the coming days about the next steps in the safe reopening of our province. My friends, we have a long road ahead of us. We're at the start of a long journey of recovery and rebuilding. And I want you to know that through it all, your government will stand with you. I will stand with you. I will be there every step of the way with you, because as long as I am Premier, you can rest assured that I will stop at nothing. Your government will stop at nothing to protect you, to support you, and to have your back. We will stand together, shoulder to shoulder. We will get through this together. And together, we will come back stronger and more united than ever.
Meanwhile, on the federal front, Justin Trudeau had some more news about protecting jobs in Canada.
I am announcing the next phase of our support for enterprises that collectively employ millions of Canadians and are experiencing unprecedented losses due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We are expanding the Business Credit Availability Program, put in place to keep small businesses solvent, to mid-sized companies with a greater need for capital. Export Development Canada and the Business Development Bank of Canada will work with private sector lenders to free up access to capital in the tens of millions for Canadian companies in every industry and in all regions across Canada. At the same time, we are establishing a large employer emergency financing facility to provide bridge financing for our largest employers if they are unable to obtain financing through other means. But let me be clear, these are bridge loans, not bailouts. Just as we are finding ways to support small and medium-sized businesses, we'll provide loans to the largest enterprises to help them weather the storm and protect the millions of jobs they provide.
Meanwhile, the province wants you to get out and stretch your legs once again. Today, hundreds of provincial parks and conservation areas are now open once again to the public since being closed in April due to COVID-19. However, today's openings do not include the 115 operating parks. That means parks that have staff working at them. This includes Arrowhead Provincial Park, Killbear, Oxtongue River, and of course, Algonquin Park. These operating parks are not expected to reopen until Friday. The parks will be open at a limited capacity, only for day visits, no camping allowed at this point. Provincial parks will also be free for daytime visits until the end of May. We're taking our first break, but when we come back, more details on the COVID-19 virus and how we're fighting it. Welcome back. As provinces across the country start taking steps to reopen the economy, one Canadian doctor working on research in the U.S. is urging officials to carefully consider this process. Earlier today, I spoke with Dr. Mark Cameron, an immunologist from Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio, who directly dealt with the SARS epidemic in Toronto nearly 2 decades ago.
So I was part of a rapid research response centered out of Toronto General Hospital in 2003 during the SARS outbreak there. There's a lot of familiarity for how I felt then versus how I feel now. The unknown of a new virus affecting a community, the unknown of how best to block transmission and to break the viruses back so that we can get back to some sense of normalcy. Toronto was the only city affected outside of Southeast Asia in 2003. So the impact of a coronavirus pandemic to Toronto was very unique and was very unique to us, and something that I don't think a lot of cities in North America feel right now with COVID-19. The lessons we learned at that time were very poignant and very urgent. Toronto had no rule book back then in how to deal with an epidemic. So putting protective measures in place, doing social distance, and declaring a state of emergency was part of Toronto's plan. And that massive public health directive and response controlled the SARS infection in 2003. Now, 17 years ago, we were just about to relieve some of those measures. And Ontario was just about to relieve its state of emergency. And once that happened, I believe it was May 17th, 2003, Toronto experienced a second wave based largely out of hospitals and long-term care facilities. And I remember that being a crushing blow to Toronto. We had just got to the other side of the initial epidemic, and then we had to go through a second wave. And the second wave lasted just as long as the first. Now, how does that relate to now with COVID-19? Well, we are just at that stage again, where we are thinking about relieving some of those health measures. So those are my concerns right now.
Yeah, I'm sure you're experiencing a bit of scary deja vu here on a much wider scale because I know on your side of the border, things are opening up even faster than they are here. And the U.S. has become the epicenter of the problem, right? So how does it feel to know that, it clearly is opening up way too early?
Right. I feel optimistic in terms of planning a return to some sense of normalcy. However, the US and Canada are still at the peak of their curves. So Canada is still adding cases every day to the case count, and it's still a linear part of our curve. We have slowed down the number of new cases every day, but that is still at its peak. So it's a little strange for me to be considering rapid removal of some of these more dramatic public health measures and get back to some sense of normalcy. It seems more difficult to plan that and to have some of those measures come off than just to wait a little longer until we are clearly down the other side of this pandemic curve.
Mark, before we had this interview, we talked a bit about the Spanish flu pandemic that has a lot of parallels to this situation now. And one of them was that they did ease these restrictions just ahead of the summer. And of course, that changed. In the fall, it came back in an almost worse way. The second wave was much worse than the first. So everyone's wondering, is that what we're going to see at this point?
So almost everybody agrees that we are due for a second wave this fall of COVID-19. And that's because there are many people who are asymptomatic with COVID-19, meaning there are people that are infected with the virus that don't know they are infected. Back in 1918, during the Spanish flu, the backdrop of that pandemic was travel due to World War I. So the virus was spreading worldwide on the backs of travel and on the backs of a period of time where obviously testing and tracing of infections around the world were at its infancy. However, at the time, doctors knew to wear masks, to not congregate in large numbers of people. They knew the basics of blocking transmission even at that time. And those measures we're using also with COVID-19, and they are working. Social distancing, wearing face coverings in public. There are a lot in common between that era and now. Obviously, there's better medical approaches. Obviously, we have made very quick gains on rolling out vaccines, at least to the first phase of human trials. But remember, that was H1N1 influenza that caused Spanish flu. We had an H1N1 influenza swine flu in 2009 that emerged in the late spring and summer at North America and spread worldwide. Now, that was part of a modern era of tracking and tracing and treatment. And because it was influenza and there is a engine every year that produces a different influenza vaccine, we had a vaccine for H1N1 swine flu by the next fall, which was coordinate with a second wave of H1N1 swine flu in North America. And the vaccine availability there at the same time helped us break the chain and prevent third and fourth waves largely from occurring. The H1N1 swine flu epidemic lasted about 20 months in North America and around the world. Now, if we look at COVID-19, it is another virus that has spread worldwide. It has a lot of foothold at various countries around the world. And it's spreading very easily because it either produces a mild illness in most people, or it's asymptomatic. People don't know they're infected as well. So people are pretty sure that there will be another wave in the fall, if not right now, if we release our precautions too early. And that's something we have to plan for and deal with. What we need to do is make sure there's enough time for the science to catch up here, either with new treatments to treat patients that have severe forms of COVID-19, or to ready the vaccine in time to break the chain outside of it running wild amongst us while we're doing all of these dramatic public health measures.
And stay tuned for part 2 tomorrow, where I speak with Dr. Cameron about the process of developing a vaccine and how a mutation could affect that. Stay tuned. We're coming back from the break right after this. Welcome back. The loss of a loved one is difficult at any time during COVID-19. The challenge for funeral homes is how to meet a grieving family's needs as well as follow provincial guidelines.
What we've seen recently, and it's more so, I think, to the acceptance that COVID isn't going away anytime quick, is that people are now understanding that they have to live with the restrictions that are in place. And people are a little more accepting that a funeral of 10 people that could be video broadcast to other family members is an option. A visitation in the chapel is an option. We can link to, your the Zoom or FaceTime, and we've had people. The very first spring burial we had this year was a family member from British Columbia that couldn't be here, so we had him on FaceTime, and he was quite emotional on the other end that he couldn't be there, but he was kind of there in as close a manner as he possibly could. And so we're trying to bridge the gap of distance and keeping people involved in different ways.
And make sure to tune in again tomorrow to find out more about how funeral homes are dealing with this pandemic. We're back to the break, but stay tuned for more after this. Welcome back. The music industry has certainly taken a big hit during COVID-19. Artists used to playing several nights a week are now stuck at home. Our Scott Acton spoke with one musician recently who's making the best of the time in isolation.
A long time ago, for a moment, you were mine.
I've got food in my belly, I've got a roof over my head, I've got a wife that loves me. I don't have a lot to complain about, but this also sucks.
Yeah. Well, that's just it for a gigging musician like yourself. I mean,
Yeah.
8 weeks at home, that's got to be tough.
Yeah, it's been different, that's for sure. I mean, obviously, I miss the gigs. I miss the interaction and the social aspect of it. You know, there has been an outlet online. I've been doing what I call my quarantine concert series, and it's been nice to connect with people weekly by Facebook. But yeah, it's not the same, that's for sure.
What's that been like, kind of sitting in a room by yourself, doing a Facebook Live performance, and, you know, when the song ends, you're not hearing the applause. You're not getting that same type of reaction. You're getting comments, but you're not getting that reaction.
You know, it's like I said, it's different. It's not like worse or better. I'm still feeling the love. It's just different. What has been rewarding is figuring out how to set up like a studio in my basement with it, which is essentially just like a cheap black curtain and some lights, but figuring out how to record and do audio. That's been really cool. I didn't really know too much about that before. But the thing that I miss is being able to talk to people after the show and, you know, connect that way. Can't really do that.
What has isolation done for creativity?
Well, it's been good. I mean, I wrote a tune second week into quarantine, and it's brought a lot of attention, which is nice. I feel like people connect to this song. It's called "Learning to Live Apart."
Living in isolation, everyone's got a quiet desperation in their eyes. Anytime you want, we can hang out on the net, but I'm starting to forget the smell of your hair. When it's all said and done, we will fill up the holes in our hearts. Until then, we're learning to live apart.
I was just feeling, I was just missing my family one day, and the ideas just flowed. So it has been really creative, a really creative time.
One of the things I've been doing with my friends during this time is talking a lot about music and trying to discover new music. And if somebody hasn't discovered you yet, how do they find you?
Well, the home base is jesseparentmusic.com or Jesse Parent, as it's spelled, music.com. That's like my home base on the internet. But if they want to, type in Jesse Parent in Google, you'll find me. Please type in Jesse Parent on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Music. I'm on all those places, and I just really want people to listen to music and tell their friends.
Until then, learning to live apart. Learning to live apart.
We're taking our last break. Stay tuned for a recap of today's headlines after this. Welcome back. Let's take a look at today's recap. The Premier will be looking to extend Ontario's state of emergency at another emergency meeting at Queen's Park tomorrow. Some parks and recreation centers are open, but parks with staff like Arrowhead will remain closed until Friday. And how close we are to a vaccine? Well, according to my recent chat with an immunologist, we could still be over a year away. Check more details tomorrow on Cogeco News. That's Cogeco News. For more information on the program, head over to yourtv.tv or connect with us on social media. And remember to watch us live at 5 Monday to Thursday. Have a great night.